Thank you. So I'm going to call this meeting to order, and the time is 9:30 on Thursday, May 12th. And Rosie, will you please call the roll?
I would be happy to, Madam Chair. Roberta Spoon.
Here.
Thomas Battaglia.
Here.
Michelle Bush.
Here.
Charles Hawquist. Charles Hawquist.
Present.
Paul Kaufman.
Here.
Paul Oates. Paul Oates. I believe Paul may need a moment to join us.
We do have a quorum, though.
We do?
Yes.
We have a quorum, Rosie?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have a quorum.
All right. Then we're, hi, Paul. Paul's here. I see him. You have Paul Oates included in the roll, Rosie?
Yes, Paul Oates.
Yes, here.
And that concludes the roll call, Madam Chair.
Okay. I would just like to remind everybody that when you're making a motion or offering a second, please state your name first. So Rosie knows who's making the motions. Rosie, do we have any public comment today?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have a public comment today. We have Mike Conger, who will be speaking on behalf of Mary Hoot. We will be holding the public comment until our action item number 3 today.
All right. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, so moving on to our action items on the agenda. The first action item is the staff's recommendation to adopt the resolution allowing the meeting to be held virtually. And that's the staff, as Johnny Tran has recommended that. So do I have a first?
Tom will move the item.
Thank you. Second?
Paul Kaufman will second.
And Rosie, will you please call the vote?
Be happy to. Roberta Spoon.
Yes.
Thomas Battaglia.
Yes.
Michelle Bush.
Yes.
Charles Hawquist.
Aye.
Paul Kaufman.
Yes.
Paul Oates.
Yes.
And with that, we have the motion passed 6-0.
Okay, great. Moving on to the second item, we're going to have a presentation from Fong Nguyen, and it's regarding the annual cost of living effective July 1st, 2022. Mr. Nguyen?
Yes. Hi, good morning. My name is Fong Nguyen. I'm a benefit supervisor in benefit administration. So nice to meet you and speak to you all today. So each year we ask Chiron to calculate the cost of living adjustments for our regular retirees and the 1981 plan retirees in accordance with the San Diego Municipal Code and the Airport and Port Plan documents. For fiscal year 2023, regular retirees will get the full 2% cost of living adjustment, with 5% going to the COLA bank to be used in future years when the CPI increase is less than 2%. And as for the 1981 plan retirees, Chiron calculates a 3.2 cost of living adjustment for them. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any questions from the committee? Seeing none, Rosie, will you please call the vote?
May I please have a mover and a second?
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is Charlie. I move to approve.
Great. And a second?
Michelle Bush, I second.
Perfect. Now will you call the vote?
I'll be happy to, Madam Chair. Roberta Spoon.
Yes.
Thomas Battaglia.
Yes.
Michelle Bush.
Yes.
Charles Hawquist.
Aye.
Paul Kaufman.
Yes.
Paul Oates.
Yes.
And with that, the motion passes 6-0.
All right, great. Moving on to number 3. And is Mr. Conger available to speak?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Hi. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Chairman Spoon. Good to see you again. I don't know if you can see me or not. My camera's on.
No, we can't see you.
Okay, well, I got dressed for no good reason then.
Oh, we all appreciate that. So we're here on the issue of staff's recommendation to deny the appeal of Mary Hoot. And I understand that you would like to speak.
Yes, and I'll just be very brief. First, I wanted to make sure that that the committee has received a copy of our letter dated December 24th, 2021, that lays out the basis of the appeal because it was not included in the original packet. You should have it. Staff's report comments about it, but I just want to make sure you had it.
I don't believe that we have your letter, Michael. We do have the staff report.
Could I ask staff to make sure you get that letter? It was, I know they've received it. It was addressed to Ms. Queen pursuant to your appeal rules, and it's dated Christmas Eve, 2021.
Bobby, it's part of all the PDF material.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Okay. All right.
And it's from Mr. Conger?
Yes, December
Okay.
24th, 2021.
All right.
Thank you, Johnny.
You're welcome.
And so this, I just want to make 3 points about staff's report. If I could direct you to page 4, where the discussion starts. I think Ms. Youngflesh wrote this. So Krolakowski, she's citing was actually our case together, my case and SDCERS, and she italicizes the word intentionally, that for estoppel to apply, that it requires SDCERS to have intentionally acted, and that's not the case, as I'm going to show you in just a second. And then if you go to the second paragraph, Ms. Youngflesh accurately says that Ms. Hoot must show that SDCERS knew the facts is the first element. And by the way, that's the element that after a trial, the court said in the Krolakowski case that Mr. Krolakowski hadn't proven the first element. But this is what the first element is, and I'm quoting from the Krolakowski case at page 566, talking about the first element. So the case says that whether or not estoppel exists is generally a factual question. But then here's the first element. For the purposes of I'm quoting, the purposes of the first element of equitable estoppel, the party to be estopped, which in this case would be SDCERS, need not have actual knowledge of the true facts. Instead, it may be shown that the party, although ignorant or mistaken as to the real facts, was in such a position that he ought to have known them, so that knowledge will be imputed to him. They're quoting cases where they used to use the masculine pronoun. In such a case, ignorance or mistake will not prevent an estoppel. And what I want to point out to you is if you go further into staff's analysis, at the very top of page 5, staff is saying that in the first full paragraph, Mr. Hoot was not ignorant of the true facts, and they're saying he should have known about the provisions of the municipal code. Here, of course, it's the survivor spouse benefit, which is at San Diego Municipal Code 24.0601. But it's exactly the opposite. Mr. Hoot is a retired police officer. He's not a pension administrator. This is all SDCERS does. SDCERS is the one that should know of the facts of how the survivor spouse benefit works, which is correct that you have to be married on the date of retirement to qualify for the surviving spouse benefit, and of course, live longer than the spouse. But you saw what happened here. SDCERS told the Hoots the wrong data, and as a result of that, they didn't continue with life insurance that would have provided essentially the same benefit. So, in conclusion, estoppel here fits like a glove because SDCERS is the one that should know 24.0601 by heart. It's not a very long ordinance, and should have properly advised this retired couple so that they can make appropriate plans. Thank you very much for your all's time and your service to the community.
Thank you, Michael. I understand we're going to hear from Susan Youngflesh.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and thank you for having me. Good morning, members of the committee. So what you have before you is the appeal to award a surviving spouse continuous benefit for Mary Hoot. You heard from Mr. Conger, Mary Hoot's counsel. Mary Hoot's deceased husband, Richard Hoot, retired from the city in 1988. At that time, he was married to Odette. When he retired, he named Odette for the surviving spouse continuous benefit. They later divorced, and he married Marilyn, who later died in 2002. In 2004, he then married Mary Hoot. In 2013, Mr. Hoot requested a proof of pension letter to refinance his house. A former SDCERS employee provided the letter and erroneously wrote that Ms. Hoot would receive the surviving spouse continuous benefit. Ms. Hoot does not qualify for this benefit under the municipal code as she was not married to Mr. Hoot at the time he retired, and he did not name her for the benefit at retirement. Ms. Hoot's argument is based, as you heard, under a theory called equitable estoppel, that she's entitled to receive the surviving spouse continuance. Her argument, as you heard, is that she relied on a 2013 letter to cancel life insurance that was written to Mr. Hoot in order to refinance his house. And therefore, SDCERS should now pay her for the rest of her lifetime. To prove equitable estoppel, she must show that SDCERS knew of the facts, that SDCERS intended that he would act upon the 2013 letter written to Mr. Hoot to refinance his house to cancel life insurance, that the Hoots were ignorant of the true state of the facts, that she was not the surviving spouse continuous, and that the reliance on the letter caused injury. Additionally, because SDCERS is a government agency, equitable estoppel only applies in unusual circumstances to avoid grave injustice and does not, and in cases that do not defeat strong public policy. Here, the municipal code, when Mr. Hoot retired, was clear that you had to be married to the person you were naming as the surviving spouse for that benefit. They were not married at that time. Mr. Hoot had available to him and or received the City Employee Safety Member Handbook, which is in your materials, which also states this when he retired. Second, it is not reasonably foreseeable that Ms. Hoot would rely on a proof of pension letter to refinance a house to cancel life insurance. Last, opposing counsel's argument that a court of equity would apply this theory is flawed because there has been no appeals court that has compelled a board, such as this one, to prospectively pay benefits that they are statutorily precluded from paying, such as in this situation. Thus, staff recommends that this committee recommend to the board to deny Ms. Hoot's appeal in its entirety, because even if Ms. Hoot could show equitable estoppel, the board cannot go beyond its statutory limitations and powers to make benefits contrary to the law. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions by the committee? Mr. Conger, do you have a response? You have 1 minute to respond.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so Ms. Youngflesh got the facts a little bit wrong, but it's correct in her report. Odette died. She did not, they did not get divorced. And that was the spouse at the time, technically, that Mr. Hoot joined DROP, not that he retired. He joined DROP first, which is the same difference under, of course, the plan. The whole point of equitable estoppel is, as a matter of fact, the leading case, City of Oakland, which we both rely on. In that particular case, the benefit at issue was the not permitted under the plan, and the court allowed it. That's the whole point of equitable estoppel, is when a person changes their position on reliance on something, and here it says in the letter that Ms. Hoot gets a surviving spouse benefit. Look, the mortgage company, I think the mortgage isn't paid off, but the mortgage company relied on that information too, thinking that the couple had this income. So, look, at some point, I realized that SDCERS employs dozens and dozens of people. I used to know the exact number, but when they make mistakes, I like this, that changes a person's position, a beneficiary's position. I think SDCERS should stand behind that mistake, remembering that in this particular case, the surviving spouse benefit wouldn't have been paid out anyway to the deceased spouse at the time. So that benefit just sat there and has never been paid to anybody. And so it makes sense to pay it to the surviving widow of Mr. Hoot, which is Mary Kathleen Hoot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Mr. Conger? Do we have any questions from the committee? I would just like to clarify something, Susan or Johnny. You've represented that this body does not have the authority to grant a benefit based upon the municipal code. Is that correct?
Well, the argument that I put forth, Madam Chair, is that this body doesn't have the, and Johnny, you can clarify this because you do advise the board, but the argument is that you can't go beyond what's allowed in the municipal code. So the distinction that Mr. Conger is talking about with City of Oakland is there's a distinction between recouping prior overpayments or improper payments, is what City of Oakland discusses, versus going beyond the authority and paying benefits that were never statutorily allowed, which is what is happening here, if this was to be granted.
Johnny, do you have a comment?
No, I think the distinction is clear in the report and from the discussion today. What the board cannot do is give benefits that aren't within the parameters of the plan. So here the plan said the surviving spouse will get the benefit if they were married a year before Mr. Hoot retired and the Mrs. survived Mr. Hoot. So if they meet those elements, they get it. In a situation where they don't, like a subsequent spouse, then they don't qualify for that. And no amount of estoppel, no amount of mistake from a staff member can really change the ability of this board to give other benefits.
All right, thank you. So although there may be other remedies for Mrs. Hoot, receiving a benefit is not within the authority of this body. I think the answer is yes. So I need a motion.
This is Charlie. I'll make the motion.
In a second?
Tom will second it.
Okay, thank you. Rosie, will you call a vote?
Be happy to, Madam Chair. Roberta Spoon,
I agree.
Thomas Battaglia,
Yes.
Michelle Bush,
Yes.
Charles Hawquist,
Aye.
Paul Kaufman,
Yes.
Paul Lotz.
Yes.
And with that, the motion passes 6-0.
Thank you, Rosie.
My pleasure.
Moving on to action item number 4, we don't have a speaker, but it's staff's recommendation to amend certain policies, the appeal policy regarding benefits, the fiduciary council policy, the public records policy, the settlement of claims or lawsuits policy, the CEO charter, and the process on board member elections. In reading it, it appeared that they were all non-substantive changes. And so I'll make the motion, and I'd like to ask for a second.
Paul will second. Paul Kaufman.
Thank you. Rosie, will you please call the vote?
Happy to Roberta Spoon,
Yes.
Thomas Battaglia,
Yes.
Michelle Bush,
Yes.
Charles Hawquist,
Aye.
Paul Kaufman,
Yes.
Paul Lotz.
Yes.
And with that, the motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, moving on to the information items. The SDCERS death notification policy and practices. Marcel?
Good morning. Thank you, Bobby. So before you is a report discussing what our death notification policies and practices are, and I'm going to walk through that process in a brief overview and then talk a little bit about why we're bringing it to you today. So we get notified of about 20 to 30 deaths every month of either members who have already retired, some may be actively working still for a plan sponsor, some may be deferred vested, but the average is 20 to 30 people that we're notified about every month. About 60% of the time, we are notified that someone has passed away by a family member. About another 10% of the time, we're notified by a plan sponsor, by one of the retiree employee associations. Sometimes a staff member may have known the person, so there's other ways we get notified. And then the last 30% is through a company called Life Status 360. And that is a company that assists us in identifying members who have passed away. That is a common practice among pension systems to use some type of company to help them identify when members have passed away. Life Status starts off with the Social Security database, and then they also get information from several states that share supporting of information, and then they also have some proprietary software where they search for notices in newspapers and obituaries. So that is their main way of getting that information to us. It has become more challenging as privacy laws have increased and gotten stricter. It has become much more challenging for these companies to get that information. There are a number of states that don't share. Information is just not flowing as cleanly as it used to, which is why I did want to discuss the process with you all today and talk about what that means. We average each year about 97% of the time. So let me back up. When someone passes away, if they are in a pay status, quite often we are not notified in time to stop the last check being paid out to them. So, if, for example, if someone were to pass away in the middle of May, then they're not entitled to the full benefit payment on May 31st. But as I said, quite often we don't get notified in time to stop that payment. So we do end up with an overpayment of a month and sometimes more than that. About 97% of the time, we are able to fully recover that. So looking back the last 7 years, we've averaged about $20,000 a year that we are not able to recover in death overpayments, which is pretty impressive considering that our payroll last year was a little over $650 million, and there was about $20,000 that we weren't able to recover. But it does happen, which leads me to what is in your over 10,000 report today, which is 2 members that we were not timely notified of their death, and there were significant overpayments. The first one was a gentleman who passed away in May of 2021. However, we weren't notified until January of 2026. And the system that we use did not have the notification that Mr. Blodgett had passed away. When one of the first things staff does is they look up in a system called LexisNexis. That also did not reflect that Mr. Blodgett had passed away. So because he had passed away quite some time ago, there were overpayments that had been made. We were fortunately able to recover all of those overpayments. We had another member, Mr. Rodriguez, who passed away in July of 2020, and we weren't notified about his death until March of 2022. So again, a long time frame where we were not notified of the death. The systems that we use had not been notified of the death. So that was an unusual situation, but that ended up being significantly more of an overpayment, about $78,000. We have recovered so far about 20, and we're actively working with the family to recover the rest of it. These are 2 unusual circumstances that happened back to back. And then since we submitted our report to the board, we had yet another one, which is another unusual one. We had an airport member who passed away in February of 21, And we were just notified in May of 22, we were notified by the plan sponsor who had been notified by the insurance company. So these are very unusual circumstances, but we're looking at what can we do to help staff identify when these circumstances happen. And as I said, it is a challenge because privacy laws have made it much more difficult to get this information. We know that this is an issue that systems throughout the state are struggling with. In the past, we did a parallel testing with another company that does something very similar to Life Status 360, and we found in that parallel testing that there wasn't a significant difference in the information provided by the two systems. We know that CalPERS, which we look to them quite often because they are so large with 2 million people, they have more deaths in a month than we have in a year. So they have a large number of people that they're working with. They are running a parallel for quite some time. They've actually hired 2 firms to try and see if they can get better information on when people have passed away. So we are working with them anxiously, waiting to hear some results of their new testing or their new process, which started in February of this year. I just wanted to let you know what our process is, what staff is doing to try and make sure that we are able to identify when people have passed away and to hopefully quickly recover those funds when it does happen. It is challenging. One of the additional challenges that we have is, as I said, Social Security Administration is a big piece of how that information is discovered. You may recall that City of San Diego employees do not pay into Social Security, so they're not going to get a Social Security benefit by virtue of their employment with the city. Airport and Port do, and I said that last member that we learned about who passed away in February of 21 was an airport member, and he was in his 80s, so he would have been receiving Social Security benefits. The Social Security Administration did not report that, or it hadn't been reported to them. We do have City of San Diego members are participating in Medicare currently, but anyone who was hired before 1986 is not participating in Medicare, so that's another challenge. We do know that funeral homes report deaths to Medicare, which is part of Social Security, but if our members are not participating in Social Security or Medicare, that makes that a challenge as well. We are continuing to look at our options on how we might better do this process and what we can do to try and identify that 30% of our population that is not notified by a family member or by one of our associations, either a plan sponsor or one of the other retiree associations, someone in the office, things of that nature. So happy to answer any questions you may have on this.
Do we have any questions from the committee? Marcel, would you just remind us, I was wondering about the materiality of it. What is the total amount of benefits that the agency sends out each month?
Last year, the full year was about $650 million. So $650 million, and we had about $20,000 that was unrecoverable.
Okay.
So it is less than 0.1% of what goes out there. And when I say unrecoverable, I want to clarify that. We're not able to recover them through our processes. However, when we send our bills out to our plan sponsors in June, that includes their annual ADC payment, we also at that time bill them for anything we have not been able to recover. So we are recovering it from the plan sponsors, and they're well aware that that is part of our process. So it is essentially, it is recovered eventually by SDCERS. It's just not recovered from the estate of the person who's passed away.
I see. So there really is no decrease to the fund because of it.
Correct. Okay. There's not an impact, a financial impact to the fund. However, we do like to make sure that we can recover as best we can and not be putting that burden on our plan sponsors.
Of course, right. All right. Well, thank you very much. Let's move on to the reports, and we have Cynthia, for your report today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for your service. Nice to see everybody. Our call center and health team have been busy answering member questions about retiree health care coverage. And as you read previously, the city is changing the timing of health care plan offerings to be effective based on the calendar year rather than the fiscal year. This is a big change for retirees, and staff has been fielding many questions about this transition. But staff worked together to create a communications plan to ensure that this goes smoothly for our members and for the team. Retirees have received detailed information mailed directly to them, and staff continues to coordinate when complex questions arrive. arise. And I want to thank Health Supervisor Sandra Clausen for managing this effort. She's doing a great job. I also want to recognize Member Services Supervisor Victoria Fedelizo, whose position was recently upgraded to match her contributions to the team. The work we do here is quite complex and has a great impact on people's lives, and the commitment staff has to our members is greatly valued. And as you know, the unwinding of Prop B is well underway. Communications Manager Jessica Taylor has participated in employee educational sessions with the City of San Diego. They have had 15 sessions just in the past week, both a number of them in person and virtual sessions. Obviously, this is led by the city, and we are working with them to make sure that everybody gets the correct answers that are posed to whichever place the people ask them. And the call center, our front line here, continues to receive updates so that they can respond to inquiries properly, meaning whether they need to be directed back to the city or whether it is something that we can definitely answer. This is difficult because the people that we're trying to answer the questions for are not in our system, and so we can't see all of their data. And so it's a fine line of making sure what information we're providing to ensure that it's all correct. And Marcelle is going to provide additional information on that in her update. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's all good work you're doing. All right, moving on to Benefits Administration. Marcelle?
Good morning again. So I wanted to give you an update on Prop B. So we were able to successfully provide a file to the city that Chiron had worked on that provided the actuarial liability of each of the Prop B employees that potentially will be joining the system. That was provided to them as we expected in our timeline. And the next week, on May 5th, the city did send out letters to about 3,600 employees that are impacted by Prop B and provided them with their options. This particular group of employees that the letters went out to, for the most part, they have an option to either opt into the pension system or to stay in SPSPH. There still are about 350 active employees that have not yet received letters, and we are working with the city. These are some unusual circumstances, or either employees who are members of unions that have not yet completed negotiations. The city is still negotiating with Local 911, which is the lifeguards union, and Local 145, which is the firefighters union, on the final resolution of the unwinding of Prop B. So the letters that went out to general members. We do anticipate getting letters out to, or providing the information to the city so they can get letters out to those remaining people in time for them to make their decisions as of June 30th. And then we go on after that to the next phase, which is about 2,000 people who have separated service from the city and need to be determined how they will be able to access that time that they were at the city working in a position that would have been eligible for SDCERS membership, but was not because of Prop B. So we continue to work closely with the city. Jessica is doing a lot of the heavy lifting right now, as Cynthia just said. In those sessions, I did sit in on one and was very impressed with her knowledge and the knowledge of city staff and the questions that people were asking. So it seems that employees are definitely engaged and looking at what their options are, so that is a good thing to see. The next steps from SDCERS standpoint is, excuse me, towards the end of July, we'll get a transmittal from the city that will have these employees on it. They will be auto-enrolled, and then there are some things that we need to do behind the scenes to make sure that everything works smoothly for them purchasing that time that they were in a position that would have been eligible for membership were it not for Prop B. And we have already had our brainstorming and planning sessions. We are well on our way to handling that and are not anticipating any issues with properly and timely getting these potentially 3,600 or 3,800 people enrolled in SDCERS. As I mentioned earlier, I don't know if everyone was on the call yet, if everybody chooses to opt into the system, it comes pretty close to doubling the city's active membership population with SDCERS. So it is a significant increase in membership. We're looking at about 5,000 active members right now, active city members, and this would be another potentially 3,800 active city members. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on the process or where SDCERS is in our planning.
Any questions from the committee? Well, thank you. Thank you, Marcelle. It's good to keep us up to date on that. It's quite a project.
It has been quite a project. It's been fun and interesting, and it has been a ton of work. So very
Right.
appreciative for everyone
Yeah.
helping out with that.
All right, moving on to information technology. David.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. The Chief Internal Auditor hired White Hat or NTT Security, they changed their name, who partnered with Truvantis to perform an annual penetration test of the SDCERS network. This effort is separate and distinct from our regular DHS, Center for Internet Security scans, internal scans, White Hat weekly pen tests, and the audits performed by RSM and the annual financial audit performed by MGO. Truvantis performed both internal and external pen tests using automated tools and a team of ethical hackers. Truvantis found it difficult to gain a foothold on our network despite having a black box connected to it. That's really saying something. They were connected to our network and they still had a hard time getting a foothold in our network. They were unable to crack any passwords, which they inform us is a common vulnerability discovered during pen testing. The IT team is working diligently to remediate the Truvantis pen test vulnerabilities. On another item, the IT division has been running email phishing campaigns as a cybersecurity training program for the past year. In our latest campaign, none of our 57 employees and contractors clicked the bogus email's embedded link. Clicking on a bogus link will send a user to a learning opportunity training webpage. We are running the training campaigns quarterly. And that's, having nobody click on the bogus link is a real positive and reflects our training and the heightened awareness that our staff and contractors have of the phishing threat. That concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That's great. That's all good news, David. Thank you for your report. And we have, do we have any questions for David?
I do.
Okay, great.
Hey, Dave, thank you so much for writing those phishing tests. Those phishing emails are getting better and better. But I was curious, do you have any metrics on how often staff push that phishiness button on their emails? So these would be real live attempts at people trying to do social engineering through our email system.
We receive about 10 or 12 phishing reports per day. That is, though, probably a low number as the actual phishing attempts. Probably the majority of staff will just delete the item as they recognize it as phishing. You actually have to click a report phishing button in order for IT to be notified. So the 10 or 12 is probably a little low per day, but it just highlights the fact that phishing is a ever-present common threat, and it is really the primary threat to our IT systems.
That's amazing, the volume of it. Well, good work, David.
Thank you.
Good work keeping them all up to date and trained on what to look for. So moving on to finance. Ted, I understand you have some comments for us today.
Morning, everybody. I'm happy to announce that SDCERS is now complete with its FY23 budget process, as Greg, Marcel, and I presented the budget to the City Council. So we had very few questions. Once again, that process went through cleanly. It was the first time in 3 years that we've actually sat in council chambers. So we understand that that will be the process going forward. But in bittersweet news, Rich Delgado, a principal accountant in the finance division, has decided that he's won the career game and will retire from SDCERS effective June 1st of 2022. Rich joined SDCERS 2 years before I did, back in January of 2011. And in our discussions over the years, I realized he had a lot of accounting experience. And in total, he ends his career with more than 40 years in accounting for both public companies and government now. He's gone through the trenches with me when I first came on board, and we started the process of transforming the finance division. So he was really instrumental on the general ledger side of getting me to this point. So I did try to talk him into staying a little bit longer, at least until I decide to retire someday in the future, which will be about a decade from now. But I wish him the best of luck. Every one of us at SDCERS has interacted with Rich, and I can tell you that he was a joy to work with. His professionalism in helping me answer difficult questions is invaluable. But with every person that leaves, it then presents an opportunity for the future. And SDCERS looked for a candidate that can deal with our pension system and our extensive complex plans, as well as having accounting knowledge. And I am pleased to announce, in fact, we were all ecstatic to announce that Fong Nguyen will be coming over to the finance group as a principal accountant effective June 1st. And while I have stolen him from Marcel's BA division, finance is under Marcel, so he's really not going anywhere, from the standpoint of his knowledge. Fong actually started as an intern in the finance division way back in, I think 2009, Fong, correct me? And then he actually worked for comptrollers for a period of time, and we brought him back over to SDCERS, and he has performed admirably in the BA division, working with benefits. And now it's time for him to dust off that accounting knowledge, because now he becomes a principal accountant in our group, and I have high hopes for him in the future. That's it for today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We certainly wish Mr. Delgado the very best in his retirement and thank him for his years of service. And I know that he will be missed by you. It's difficult to find employees like Mr. Delgado, I know. And his work has really made a difference for SDCERS. And Fong, we welcome you to the finance department. And you certainly know what you're getting into, so I'm glad that you decided to join them. It's an important job, so thank you. I assume that everybody's read the Legal and Compliance Division report and the members owing in excess of $10,000 in the financial statements. And if there are no questions on the report, I'd like to just move on and ask if there's any questions or comments from our chair or from the board or from our CEO. Greg, I'm sure you have something.
Oh, I love talking. So again, I would like to just strongly echo Ted's comments about Rich's retirement. Rich is one of those people that really personifies SDCERS values. And you never hear about Rich because he's getting the work done and he works hard and does good work. And it's just a real pleasure to have Rich on the team. But I'm going to miss him most of all because he was our water club treasurer. And now I have to go find another water club treasurer. But as you know, we're a trust fund. We don't spend money on ourselves. So we all pitch in for good, fresh, clean water. But it is also equally a joy to have Fong move over to the finance division. Fong has always been a very, very valuable team member. And, with such good people, you always, worry about them leaving the company. But it's just really glad that he found another opportunity within SDCERS. So I'm just really, really pleased that Fong's reaching out and expanding his role here at SDCERS. Just really, really, really pleased about that. And Marcella already said that she's going to occasionally reassign him back into benefits to handle some very difficult cases. So it's good to keep his knowledge in-house. I'd also just like to say a couple of words of thanks about the Prop B. Marcel, I think, was understating the amount of work that this project has been. And it is just so great that we have been invited in by the city as they're negotiating with the unions and finding their solutions about using us as a resource to find solutions that will do what they want them to do. And I just really would like to tip my hat to both Marcel and Johnny, who have really done a tremendous job in this effort and continue to do so as we're still working through helping the city with the required municipal code changes. And I don't want to also minimize the many people in addition to Marcel and Johnny. And Cynthia mentioned a little bit about Jessica Taylor and her work with communications, but also Cynthia has been helping quite a bit, and many others, including Fong and others in the Benefits Administration's member services, legal teams. Just there's been so many of us involved in the process. So just really thankful that the project is going along well. The letters are out, and the next step would be to get those letters back to find out who's going to be our new clients, who's joining the retirement system. So the project's unfolding well. I'm just very appreciative of staff's efforts, and importantly, the board's commitment and helping us give us the resources to get these projects done correctly. So thank you, and it's a pleasure to see everybody, and hopefully we will see you in person at our July meeting. So that's our hope, and thank you very much.
Greg, what's the update on the move?
On the move, we are still waiting for plan check and construction budgets. So we're hopeful that we will be moving in 2022, but right now we don't know the exact dates. On the third floor, they have started to ramp up construction on the third floor, what they call the conference center, which includes the audience portion of our boardroom. And they're really starting to break out the sledgehammers and create lots of dust and mess. So hopefully we will be able to meet in July here at SDCERS headquarters. But if not, we may have to find alternate meeting space.
And by July, will there be an order from the governor that we can meet in person?
Right now, we are required to meet in person unless we have an exception. And COVID provided an exception to the open meeting laws, which our local municipality is the Brown Act. And so we are allowed to have these virtual meetings because of that exception. And that exception is still valid. And again, you're supposed to use that exception when we believe that it's in everyone's best interest not to meet in person. And as our communities are getting healthier and healthier, we have to make that decision. Do we want to meet in person, or because of health reasons, should we meet remotely? I do know we have new variants coming into the country. They're talking about new surges. I am hopeful that they will not necessitate another, lockdown, people shelter in place. So I'm going to hope for the best and plan for the best. And hopefully we'll be meeting in July in person.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for all of this. And do we have any closed session issues? No?
We do not, Madam
I don't believe
Chair.
so. It's not on the agenda. So we have no closed sessions. I guess we are, any comments from the board or from the committee members? Nope. All right, as we've concluded our agenda, then this meeting is adjourned.